am not long home from a couple of weeks in Italy where I was working with Lucas Cycling Club, supporting them on a coast-to-coast cycling trip. Now, I don't know if you've ever been on a cycling trip before, especially one when you've gone from point to point, but often they require long days on the bike. You might be riding 100, 150 kilometers of riding. And in this particular case, the riders were climbing 2.5, sometimes even 3,000 meters of climbing a day. Big days on the bike. When we're thinking about nutrition has a big impact on whether that is successful or not successful. They asked me to come on board and support them by working with making their ride lunches each day to keep the guys and the girls that were on the camp on that trip well fueled and able to get through the whole week. And I thought I would give you a bit of an inside thought about what a sports dietitian is thinking about when it comes to food, drinks, fluids, energy, carbs, proteins, fats, what type of foods I am thinking about putting on the table when I'm looking at fueling somebody for a camp like this. Now, I've been working as a sports dietitian for over 15 years, and the last 5 or 6 years I've been doing at least a couple of times a year a camp like this. I do a couple of camps a year for pro cyclists where I'm doing breakfast, lunch, dinner, every meal that they're having, and also do a couple of private camps. So it's a lot of fun. It's a good challenge, and it takes me out of my comfort zone and helps me understand my one-on-one clients better and be able to give more practical advice and help them see how they can fuel their lifestyle, their activities better. One of the questions or the comments that a rider in the group said when they first joined the camp, they're like, I don't know why we need a sports dietitian. I don't know why we need a nutritionist. Like, what's the point? How is that going to benefit us? And some of the benefits of having a sports nutritionist or someone that specializes in food and fueling for cyclists, triathletes coming on these events is obviously I know how much people need to eat, and I'm more likely to see people underfueling in their training, in their exercising, than they are overfueling. The timing is a big part. Typically when people aren't eating enough in their training, in those rides, you end up trying to play catch up calories. And if you're doing a couple hundred kilometers a day, then the catch up time is really limited, because sometimes these riders might be on the bike from 8 or 9 in the morning to 5 or 6 in the afternoon, depending on the distance, depending on the elevation. I know how to manipulate food in a way that it makes it palatable, makes it easy to get the energy that they need, and they can digest it really well. And understanding how to manipulate that. A lot of times people will go on a camp and they might be just given ham and cheese sandwiches, and that might be fine for a day or two, but it's not going to fuel you or support you for a week-long training camp. So that's where I sort of come in about thinking, how can we ensure like, yes, you're getting the energy, the macronutrients, but also the types of foods that are going to keep you strong, keep you healthy, and stop you getting sick so you actually finish the end of the week in one piece. Also, can tolerate for allergies, intolerances, personal preferences. On this particular camp last week, we had someone that was gluten-free, needed to have a strict gluten-free diet, where in previous camps, I've had people who have nut allergies or they're vegetarian, they're vegan. We had a vegetarian athlete on this trip as well. So I know how to manipulate and adapt the foods that I'm putting on the meals so that they aren't missing out. Because if someone doesn't eat meat, obviously you can't just expect them to have a sandwich with just veggies on it. It's being able to work with those personal preferences and find a suitable alternative to give them the energy or the nutrients that that particular need. And finally, I understand how, and I advocate for nutrition is so much more than just numbers and calories. It's a fuel, but it's a mood enhancer. It gives you energy. It gives you that little carrot. Like if you're tired or you're having a really rough day, the weather's perhaps not as great. If you know that you've got a good lunch and you've got a good meal waiting for you when you finish, then that can be a really good motivator to keep going. Health is a big part of that, but I'm also thinking about like what foods and energy drinks, snacks can we also include that are going to be a bit of a mood enhancer. And one of the best compliments that I had from a person that was on this camp, at the end of it, at the beginning he was like, I don't know why we need a nutritionist for this. And the end of it, he was like, I never want to go on a cycling camp without a sports dietitian after this. That was really good feedback for me, and especially from people who've been on many, many camps. When we're thinking about nutrition, when I'm thinking about your exercise, your cycling, whether it's a camp, whether it's training, whether it's racing, there's key time points when we want to be adding food in. So if you've listened to me for a while, you've gone through my field framework, you're a field team member, you'll have gone through all that and you'll understand how the way that I teach people is to think about, we've got our everyday nutrition, we've got training nutrition and race nutrition. The training nutrition and the race nutrition go on top of what you need every day. The training is what dictates where we add food in, and we add food in before, during, after. And by optimizing that lets us actually finish that week without getting sick, lets us finish the week with having to get in the van unless you want to, and it lets you do those back-to-back days without the fatigue, without the injury and getting sick. Because if you're not feeling enough in those big weeks, you're more prone to getting sick and then having to take off time either during it or immediately after the camp. When I'm thinking about energy, first and foremost, I'm thinking about carbohydrate. And there's a whole bunch of different foods that we can use to incorporate that. It doesn't have to be bread. It doesn't just have to be bread. Obviously, when you're in Italy, if you're in France, you want to take advantage of the ingredients that they have in those countries. And I do. So I love being able to shop at markets. If possible, go to a fresh bakery. We had a birthday on this particular camp, so I made sure I found a really nice cake at a patisserie. I like to mix it up and keep a lot of variety in the foods and the meals that I'm providing my riders. So sometimes we had sandwiches, sometimes we had wraps, sometimes we had like a rice salad or a quinoa salad, but every day there's different ingredients, there's different flavors, and there's a different combination of foods around that to keep people from getting flavor fatigue and getting boredom. Sometimes there's capacity to make that yourself. Other times we have to just rely on what's in the supermarkets, depending on where you're staying. If you're in an Airbnb, obviously you might have a kitchen accessible to you. If you're in a hotel, you're probably not going to be able to use their kitchen. Although in one situation I was able to use the kitchen, which was great because then I could make some ride food and a whole bunch of other things specifically to help the people that were fueling and riding on this particular camp. I always like mixing up the flavors and having a combination of different ingredients. So for example, sandwiches, we might have had ham, there might have been ham or the prosciutto and cheese. Another day I used like artichokes and roasted eggplants and mixing things up. Sometimes I might use tuna as the protein source. The primary fuel that I'm looking at here is carbohydrate, and I would also be mixing it up using drinks, perhaps using snacks or crackers, salty crackers, a little bit of Haribo, maybe like a Mars bar and some Snickers bars. Every group is going to be different, so you can tune in to around what they particularly like. I don't want people only be using Snickers, because if that's the only thing they're using, they're probably going to get to day 2 or day 3 and be like, oh, no, I'm over sweet stuff. We want to have lots of salty options. So pretzels, flavored crackers, they work really well. Liquid carbs are also important. So when I'm thinking of hydration, I would be getting Cokes and lemonades and Fantas. And sometimes I'll see people thinking like, oh, you're a sports dietitian, how can you recommend these foods? It's context specific. I'm not recommending someone go and drink Coke all day, every day. I'm not recommending someone go and eat Haribo and lollies all day, every day. But in a context of, if you're doing 150 kilometers a day with 3,000 meters of climbing, you're probably going to need to eat 4,000 if not 5,000 calories in that day. Trying to get that as catch-up calories is going to end up in disaster. The more you can get in the ride, the less of a deficit you'll be in, the better you'll feel on the bike, the better you'll recover. And using concentrated fuels in that moment, in that time point, is a key part of that. When I'm thinking of those carbs, making sure that they're not just dry, having some sort of moisture and some sauces or spreads in either the pasta or the rice salad or in the sandwiches. So for example, one day sandwiches, I had a layer of pesto on the bottom, and I also had a layer of like a lactose-free cream cheese, because some people didn't tolerate a huge amount of dairy, but that is going to add, again, a little bit of flavor, a little bit of fat, a little bit of extra energy without having to increase the volume. And what's interesting is that people's appetites fluctuate. So you might have one day where people are eating a lot more and other days that they're not eating quite as much, and being flexible around that and catering for that. And that's why I would use things like the biscuits, the cakes as a supplement to help give people that energy when their appetite might be perhaps a little bit lower than on another day. Protein isn't my first priority when I'm thinking of like the mid-ride lunches on these particular days. Yes, are going to have a little bit of protein, but you're not using protein as an energy source when you're riding. If you're using protein as an energy source, that's a big warning sign that you are in a huge deficit and you aren't eating enough and you're breaking down your muscles. So we're not using it as our primary fuel source during exercise. After, for recovery, yes, we want to use that for recovery, but in the exercise, a small amount. We don't need to be using a huge amount during the ride. So I would use things like ham, chicken, tuna, beans for the vegetarians, tofu. Might use a little bit of nut butters or cheese. Cheeses and nut butters, they're a higher source of fats than they are protein. But again, they're there as a support to add flavor, add interest, and add a little bit of protein. From that fluid side, as I said before, I'm thinking of hydration, energy, things like Coke, Aquarius, which is a bit of a lemon electrolyte sort of drink that you can get in Spain and a lot of places in Europe. I'd use things like Fanta, lemonade. They're going to give you extra fluid and energy to keep you well fueled and rehydrated. Vegetables are a interesting one. I always have some fruit and vegetables on the plate and on the table. I took a photo and someone saw that I'd made this salsa, like a tomato salsa, which people were eating with corn chips. So they're like, why are you eating tomatoes on the ride? I'm like, well, this group, they love it. They're really enjoying it. Same thing with the canned corn. Some people will eat tons of tomatoes. Some people might eat tons of canned corn, and providing foods that the riders and the group enjoy eating, it having a little bit of fiber, a little bit of ions and minerals, it keeps people regular. Because a lot of times what people do on these camps, they're only eating lollies, only eating more refined foods. They don't have the fiber, they don't have the micronutrients, and they start to get a bit clogged up and a little bit constipated. We don't want that happening. We also don't want you to be so full of fiber that you have gut issues. When I'm thinking of during ride fuel, same thing with carb loading. The veggies are there as a bit of a garnish. They support it, they enhance it, they make it more interesting. And I had a lot of comments from people on this camp, from people who were like, oh, the salad, the veggies that were in the sandwiches, they just made it more interesting, more enjoyable, and help them with their gut. With fruit, I'm always thinking that this is a way we can get, again, a little bit of extra energy and hydration. So things like melons or pineapple, they're very, very juicy. There's a lot of extra fluid and energy. They're tasty. People really like them. So yeah, watermelons, I'd cut that up, and it's always a big hit. That sweetness that isn't super overpowering compared to like the sweetness that you might find in just having lollies or cakes and bits and pieces. I would always use, obviously with salad, like pre-washed ones. Sometimes with salads that you can get from the supermarkets pre-cooked or pre-chopped. In the past, I've used things like potato salads, or I've used like carrot that's already sort of grated up, or there might be like a pasta salad or a couscous salad or a rice salad that we can incorporate if we don't have a kitchen. We took a rice cooker with us on this particular camp, so there were situations where I was able to prepare rice. One of the hotels did let me use their kitchen, which was great because I was able to cook a whole bunch of pasta, which made for a really tasty lunch one of those particular days. Ride food snacks for during the ride, in between, is another area where I found that being involved with these sorts of camps, I can help people fuel better. And there's so many different recipes of DIY ride food. It doesn't have to be the commercial products. Making your own ride food is really important for avoiding flavor fatigue. It keeps the costs down. You can make things specific to your personal taste. It helps also avoid flavor fatigue, because if you've got the same bar, the same gel an entire week, you're probably going to find you get to day 2, day 3, and you are sick of it and you never want to eat it again. I made these energy balls out of oats, peanut butter, honey. In the past, I've made them with coconut, but I didn't in this situation. I wasn't measuring it because I didn't have scales and I was making it on the go. I think I used a kilo of oats, a whole tub of peanut butter, and then honey to kind of like mix it. And they're a big hit. I find when you're rolling them up, make them in a smaller bowl that you can just eat in one go rather than have to eat like 3 or 4 bites of it. That also makes it easier. Rice cakes were another big hit. This was one of the flavors that I made. I'm going to add that as a recipe on my website shortly, where I used nectarines, lemon. Originally, I was thinking like lemon flavored rice cakes because I wanted something a little bit less sweet, and I was using like the bottles of lemon juice in them. And it was just missing something. And I had all these nectarines. So I chopped them up super fine. If you're adding fruit to rice cakes, you want to chop it up really fine and cook those in, like I literally just put it all in the rice cooker in one go. Added a big scoop of coconut oil, some sugar, huge hit. They were really, really popular, and put them in the Ziploc bag, let them cool down, and then cut them and wrap them with foil and parchment paper the next day. So if you can't get that double-sided parchment paper, one layer of foil, one layer of parchment paper, and that's going to avoid it getting stuck. I was also a little bit involved with the recovery nutrition. It's a bit harder when you're staying at hotels because you're not often able to prepare meals and foods on site or have it available if they've got a cafe, if they've got a restaurant, if they've got a bar. But we would have a protein shake available for all the riders to drink straight away afterwards. Sometimes there were some snacks and bits and pieces afterwards. When I'm thinking of recovery nutrition, I'm thinking we want to be restoring carbohydrate, rebuilding protein, rehydrating with fluids, and then revitalizing with micronutrients with the fruits and vegetables when possible. And I'm working with people in camps. This is the things I'll be adding in their recovery meals before. I've done a number of camps over the years. I did one with my first one, I think, or second one was with Zwift a number of years ago. And we would have fruit, we would have crackers, we would have smoothies made with yogurts and protein from real foods. We would have fresh cakes and a combination of foods that were really appealing to people when they've been on the bike all day and are going to help them refuel sooner rather than able to eat more normally the rest of the day. So that's a couple of the things I'm thinking about when it comes to mid-ride foods and snacks. I'd love to hear your thoughts about foods that you found, you've discovered when you've been on training camps. I think there's a lot of combinations of foods that you can get in cafes that you can make on the go that are going to help you with these longer days that are more like a steady pace where you can incorporate the carbs and some fats, some real food to keep you happy mentally, physically, emotionally, and fueling a really long ride. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, fuel your ride, and I will see you next time.